Hello again. It has long been observed that some topics are completely off limits for politicians to discuss openly, and often this in turn means that the public also tends to avoid those subjects. To mention these publicly, the court ruin. One remembers Enoch Powell speaking about immigration in 1968 and how swiftly this extinguished his prospects of advancement in the Conservative Party. More recently, suggesting that men dressing as women and changing their names were really still men, has for some years been regarded as an outrageously illiberal viewpoint and one condemned by all mainstream political figures. The general public often fell into line and began at least to avoid expressing strong views to counter this particular idea. The convention of allowing some subjects to be talked about and even championed is often called the Overton Window. It's named after Joseph Overton, the American political analyst who devised the idea. Politicians, newspapers, television stations, and the general public have certain accepted standards and ideas for what may be talked about and proposed. These range all the way from official policy through to what is popular, what might be thought sensible, to what is just about acceptable, to what is seen as radical and ultimately unthinkable. The Overton window is not fixed, it moves back and forth, sometimes from left to right, as a range of views which might be considered respectable changes. In the description to this video, I give a link to the Wikipedia article on this subject. Sometimes those changes in perspective take decades to move from being radical to being government policy. One thinks, for instance, of legalizing same sex marriage, which 50 years ago would have been unthinkable and gradually came to be seen as acceptable and then sensible until it became official policy of the British government. This particular change took many years. What has been noticeable lately is that the Overton window seems to be moving very fast these days, so that topics which were completely taboo a year ago are now being freely spoken of and considered as sensible by some politicians. The announcement by Keir Starmer of an official inquiry into the scandal of the Pakistani taxi drivers and so on is a case in point. A year or two ago, this was universally regarded as something only far-right radicals would be willing to talk about. The general view of the public was that it was a very touchy business and best left alone. This has now changed, and suddenly it has become a popular thing to discuss, and politicians, newspapers, and the general public feel free to express their views on it. The same thing is happening about immigration, which many people avoided mentioning for decades, perhaps remembering what happened to Enoch Powell when he spoke openly of it. Similarly, a year ago, only a few radical feminists were speaking out about men posing as women being able to access women's facilities, and the general view was that this was something best not talked about for fear of looking like a mad extremist. It has now become the most respectable thing in the world to question whether men should be able to use the same changing rooms as women. The idea is freely discussed. It seems to me that the increasing number of such formerly unthinkable topics being debated now tends towards those which were previously associated with right wing folk. And this in turn indicates that perhaps the general public is starting to veer a little more to the right lately than it is to the left, which I personally find quite a heartening reflection.